That was a nice Ben Affleck look at the camera moment there from Jay and Silent Bob.
Welcome to SinCast, presented by Cinemasins.
This episode of SinCast is brought to you by HelloFresh. Visit HelloFresh.com and use promo code SinCast30 to save $30 off your first week of deliveries. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SinCast. This is Chris Atkinson from Cinemasins, joined as always by the voice of Cinemasins, Jeremy Scott.
Welcome.
And from Music Video Sins, Barrett Share.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're taking a break from the Mount Rushmore for, I don't know, an undetermined amount of time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to try to define the decade.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about movies from the 70s.
In a world of pure imagination.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
You talking to me?
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Run away! Run away!
This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
But we're going to see, how are they different from movies that we see today? So we're going to get into the 70s quite a bit. We're going to try to define that decade a little bit. But we're really like, how does it define us now? Where are we now with movies since the 70s?
Yeah, because it's hugely influential, obviously.
Right. So, we'll just try to get into that and have a nice discussion about it.
Yes.
It could go all over the place for all I know.
It probably will.
And it probably will.
That was a nice Ben Affleck look at the camera moment there from Jay and Silent Bob.
So what do you think defines the decade of the 1970s?
I like the impetus of this. It was brought on, just a little background, it was brought on by a question from a listener, actually. They were talking about, like, how do you define the 90s? How do you define the 80s? Obviously, they're known for certain styles, and they're known for, obviously, certain landmark movies. And even the last 2 decades. And now that we've got, a lot of perspective on the 70s being where we are right now, I think it makes sense to just say, like, what immediately springs to mind? And to me, I mean, just to kind of start it off, it's more of like gritty neo-realistic stuff and the auteur stuff that springs to mind when I think about 70s.
I was going to say grime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my first word association. 70s movies, dirty.
Yeah.
Like physically, not like sexually.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Well,
it's totally grimy because you think about a movie like Taxi Driver where Robert De Niro is driving around that old New York City, that one that people who've lived there their whole lives wish would come back for some reason.
We need more porno theaters.
Yeah, exactly. Back when Times Square was not what they now sort of just like derisively call the Disneyfication of Times Square, where like there's all these big huge companies and everything that have come in and like made everything like welcome to our world.
Right. Did you see any of that old stuff when you were there? Like, or was it all Disneyfied?
No, it was all Disneyfied because the person that is always considered responsible for changing all that was Rudy Giuliani.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around, I guess, the late 90s or whatever when all that stuff started to kind of go away. So you don't have porn theaters anymore. It's mostly like, Hershey's, and you have MTV and, a lot of Broadway plays and billboards and it's very touristy.
Yeah.
It's extremely touristy. But back in the Taxi Driver days, he's driving around and there's hookers on the sidewalk and there's porno theaters and there's you want to get into some sin, man.
Yeah.
Fucking Taxi Driver is your ticket. And that New York. And that's why a lot of times we've had these sins in the past where people are in modern day New York. And they walk past something it's like 1970s. I always say 1976 New York because that's the Taxi Driver. Because when you walk through New York now, you're not going to see a lot of that.
No,
you don't see that out in the open and everything. But they make it still try to seem like New York's this place where those people hovering in the shadows.
Like in the Dark Tower, you can practice your gunplay.
Yeah,
in an abandoned
yes, you can
warehouse downtown.
Yeah.
I may need to watch this movie just so I can catch the references.
Oh, it's bad.
All right. So back to the 70s then.
Yeah, so why, obviously when we started the best year since we've been alive, Jeremy was born in 1975, so we started in 1975, but obviously that, neglected a lot of earlier 70s movies, including something like The Godfather and Godfather 2.
Yeah.
Are we going to go ahead and say that Godfather is the best movie of the decade?
I think, yeah.
Let's keep talking.
I think it is. I don't think I've thought about, The Godfather always comes up even without decade specific.
That's true.
Yeah, it's usually like people will say it's the best one of all time.
One of the best of all time.
Right.
So to say that it's, it can't possibly, well, I don't know. There are some contenders obviously in there. I just don't think there's anything that's going to beat Godfather. But the thing that's cool about The Godfather, and I was actually just watching this the other day, that whole opening wedding scene, that is something you will never see again in movies. You'll never.
Why do you say that?
You never see that.
Mm-hmm.
Movies these days, even though some of them are way over-long and whatever, don't spend a whole lot of time in one area that doesn't advance the story. Now, there are some things that advance the story, obviously. It's a lot of the stuff with Brando and, them coming to the Godfather, and you learn this character through all these people who keep coming in and asking for favors and everything. But there's so many little side things. They'll go to and show some of the ceremony, and they'll show the one guy who's upset that the guy's taking pictures. And there's all these little things that they add in there and you see Sonny, he's banging this girl in the, in a private room somewhere, and and it just goes around introducing you to all the characters and what they're all about and everything. Yeah, movies these days really just want to I want to get away from this. I want to go to the next scene right now.
Yeah. Can you imagine if The Godfather started off with a narration?
Yeah, I know. And it would this year if it came out in 2017, you'd have Michael Corleone coming on there and going, back in the day when I was a young war hero, I shot down many planes in World War II, whatever the fuck he did. But
it's amazing. It's character exposition perfectly without being overt about it. You understand how powerful and how intimidating Vito is. You understand what a hothead Sonny is. You understand where Michael's coming from. Without overt stuff besides him talking about, Kay and kind of giving that backstory about the band leader. You even see Robert Duvall when he goes up to get Sonny and, he's knocking on the door. He knows that he's fucking this bridesmaid or whatever. He's got this little smile on his face as he comes down to like a boys will be boys type of thing.
Oh, that's Sonny.
Even though he just saw Sonny's wife like 2 seconds.
There's a point later on where Sonny tells that same girl, I'm gonna, what's he say? He said, I'm gonna knock you out or something next time or something like that. And she's like, oh, I can't wait, and all that. But yeah, that scene in particular is just something, if you watch it, you're in a different era immediately. You know that this is something that is, and now The Godfather is elevated above most movies. So it's not like this is an example of every movie that came out. But you see that in the 70s a lot, where they're just taking their time with things. They're not really in a rush to get to that next scene. They want to take their time and say, look, this is what the whole scene is. You're going to sit there and watch it and enjoy it. We're just going to let that marinate for a bit. And that's the way those movies are. They don't do that they don't do that anymore in movies. And I think there's there's probably something that happened over time, Star Wars, where people were like, we want that story to move. We want it to just keep going like Star Wars. And again, like anything that's imitated and is hugely influential, they take those little elements out of the movie, and then they say, let's put it in all movies. Like that's going to make the movies better somehow. Even though Star Wars is a singular achievement and everything, it's a different. You can't just emulate Star Wars by saying, well, let's make the story move fast. You can't do that.
I don't know. I was actually just thinking while you were saying that even Taxi Driver doesn't seem like it moves very fast.
No, it doesn't.
And that's lost these days. You don't have too many filmmakers well, ironically enough, Sofia Coppola is one of them,
Right.
whose films definitely take their time and don't rush through anything. But I think back here in the 70s, where so many greats are basically coming out, having their coming out party, there's the grooves weren't worn so deep yet in storytelling, where, okay, we have this kind of story, pour out the liquid and it immediately goes in the same groove and hits the same beats that we're used to. Now we've got 60 more years of that shit to get entrenched, and that's why so many movies feel copy-paste, whether it's a romantic comedy or a horror film, is that the grooves have been worn too deep. But back when they were making Godfather and Taxi Driver, there were either no grooves for some of those genres, or they were just faint enough that people like Scorsese or Coppola could veer off and find their own groove path and not have to follow some blueprint.
And you're touching on something that, and we've already talked about the griminess of these 70s movies. That's another thing is in sort of related to that is there was no fear in being dark or having a bad ending or, not a happy ending.
Yeah, those were celebrated.
Yeah, those were celebrated. And so movies like The French Connection and Taxi Driver, even though Taxi Driver has that weird, it's happy type of ending. It's not really a happy ending, but it kind of has that false sense of a happy ending. Nashville, a lot of these movies, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, all these movies
Apocalypse Now,
all these movies just didn't give a fuck about you being happy at the end of it. They wanted to tell a story, and that story, served as, this is how it ends. We don't want it to just come out of nowhere with something to make this happy and make you feel good. It was a strong contrast to 6 or 7 decades prior of movies that just tried to make everything happy. I mean, some maybe here and there were subversive enough to have a sad ending or whatever.
Hitchcock.
Yeah, Hitchcock, which is, of course, that's where his influence starts really coming in in the 70s, even though he himself was not making great movies. There's some pretty decent 70s Hitchcock movies.
What did he make in this? Do you know off the top of your head?
Frenzy is one. Family Plot. Frenzy's okay. Frenzy's pretty good. But yeah, this whole thing, a lot of these filmmakers were sort of being ushered in with the French New Wave and all that. They really enjoyed what they were doing and said, let's try to put this in American cinema. And so then you started seeing darker stories, and the MPAA, the forming of the MPAA also helped with that, because now you could make movies that were, children aren't allowed to be in it, so or whatever. And of course, there's a lot of things about the MPAA, but it at least allowed.
It was a guideline.
Yeah, it at least allowed for darker stories to be told, and they didn't have to go through that Hays Code stuff anymore.
Yeah, a lot of these, some of my favorite movies of all time, probably the biggest concentration of my favorite movies of all time are from the 70s. Because you got Close Encounters, you've got Jaws, obviously, Star Wars starting out, and then the two Godfathers, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Taxi Driver, Alien. There's just this crazy amount of concentration within this decade that I could point to and say, I would watch these movies. It's not one of those things where you're I recognize that something like The Revenant. I'm not going to watch The Revenant over and over and over again. I enjoyed seeing it. It's a cinematic achievement, but it's just not something that I'm just going to throw on and just enjoy. With a lot of these movies from the 70s, I want to watch these things right away. Even some bizarre shit like The Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
And, shit got weird in the 70s.
Yeah.
Well, that's because it's basically the 50s, smoked some grass in the 60s, and started doing some other drugs, and we ended up with the 70s.
Yeah.
Because we had almost 2 decades of where almost all the movies were light, bright, breezy. This is where you had your concentration of beach party movies that we parody today and stuff like that. And then we get into the 70s, and it's fucking gangsters and guns and dirty streets and prostitutes. And when was Dog Day Afternoon? Was that the 70s?
Yeah, it was 75.
Yeah, so he was a gay man in that character in the mid 70s. That's shocking to me that they made that movie in that era.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there was fallout at the box office from that fact or what have you.
I don't think there
But
was.
it feels
actually.
pretty groundbreaking to me. I feel like even a film today would struggle with a certain amount of the population if it had a bank robber and a heist movie who just happened to be gay.
I know. Yeah, that's the layering effect of this of these types of movies, where that's just a minor little detail in this amazing heist, gone wrong thing,
Right.
where the hostages turn to the side of the hostage, whatever, the hostage taker.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, it's kind of like The Negotiator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
You laugh, but The Negotiator is really entertaining.
oh yeah, man, I love it. But yeah,
It's ridiculous,
Dog
but
Day
it's
Afternoon
really
is on.
entertaining.
who do you think would kind of own this decade? I think Francis Ford Coppola has a good shot at like being the person that you think of most associated with 70s.
Yeah, his filmography in the 70s is pretty untouchable.
Right.
You have two Godfathers, you have The Conversation, and you have Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
All four of those movies have some sort of legendary status in some way. Conversation still doesn't get quite the love it should.
Right.
It's another movie, by the way, that has dark ending, dark themes all the way through it.
Yeah.
Doesn't rush itself at all.
Does not rush itself at all, but that's what makes that movie so suspenseful, and it's what sort of has been lost in movies. I know that we're just like just fawning over the 70s, but that's the reason why. There's a reason why this decade is considered the last great studio decade of studio movies. It's because the studios let the directors do what they wanted. Basically, they found talented people and said, "Here, do this," and everything. We were talking about Dog Day Afternoon a minute ago. I don't know if it was a huge hit or not, but that's the thing about movies from the 70s. They still weren't worried about this huge box office draw. Movies had time to get an audience. They didn't have to worry about 3 new movies coming out the next week. One of the things that happened with Star Wars was that they started to get pretty accurate about whether or not that movie was a flop or not after Star Wars came out, or became a little bit too quick on the trigger to say that something's a flop after the opening weekend, because Star Wars did such gangbusters. They, movies that came out and didn't do Star Wars business suddenly were not huge. They weren't. They didn't give them the same chance or whatever. That doesn't really take effect until like 1993, where that's where movies really start exiting theaters quicker and everything. Like before that, you have movies that would last a whole whole year sometimes.
Right.
But around that 93, which is when I started working in movie theaters, big, huge movies would be gone, in 3 or 4 months. But in the 70s, you come out with a movie and it could play 7 or 8 months to pick up an audience. You know?
And people would still go see it.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
we were talking last week when we were done about Titanic and how it didn't have like a big 200 million opening. It basically had its opening of, I don't know, 20, 30 million, something like that. And then for like 3 goddamn months, it was 30 or 40 million, 30 or 40 million, 30 or 40 million, 20 or 30 million, 30 or 40 million. And it just, that bucked all expectations by that point, by the time Titanic came out, which is 4 years after 93.
Yeah.
We're already to the point where a movie that does have legs and can find an audience for 3 months is the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And Titanic, even Titanic at our theater, lasted 5 months, which is nothing compared to what stuff did in the 70s and everything. Titanic, you're right. That movie made 20 million every week, it seemed like. And then I thought it was just about to die down, and Valentine's Day hit.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
Everybody's on date night,
it slammed again that weekend. And so, it's one of those rarities when a movie can last that long. Now they're sort of like, studios are really trying to get that movie on home video as fast as they can. But even the home video market now is getting really. I went to Best Buy the other day.
Yeah.
They used to have 3 huge aisles of Blu-rays at this one that I used to go to. And then I started noticing one was gone.
Yeah.
And then another one was gone. And now it's relegated to these tiny little
Did they
cardboard
de-alphabetize
displays.
yours? The Best Buy near me
it doesn't
is
have any
completely
real.
de-alphabetized.
Are you serious?
It doesn't have any real sections anymore.
Well, it had the one at my house has, or near my house, has sections like horror or action. Nothing is alphabetized.
Oh, that's fucked. They just throw it on there.
They're trying to make me spend more time there hunting and pecking for the movie that I want. It's really goddamn annoying. That's why I just started buying from Amazon. Fuck it.
Yeah. And Best Buy still will have that like new release, thing that's up. That's where I get the stuff most of the time. Where I get the stuff. But so yeah, the 70s definitely marked by grime, by dark themes and dark. There's hardly anything even. Because and then you have Vietnam going on at the time. You have a lot of Vietnam War movies that decided to go very dark. Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
Like you had family dramas that were about divorce, like Kramer versus Kramer. There wasn't very many like just uplift. I think that's why Star Wars also hit some sort of like different kind of gear, because by 77 people were getting a lot of this darkness, and finally something came out that was uplifting and everything. You mentioned Klaus. You mentioned Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Those are two movies, by the way, that still take their time.
Oh yeah,
and they're considered, and Jaws is always lumped in with Star Wars as this influential to how movies would be made. I think Jaws is more influential to how movies were maybe marketed, or like how they're perceived as box office successes or failures. But Jaws is nothing like Star Wars as far as a story is told.
Oh yeah,
Jaws today, if you made Jaws, there would be none of that preamble. I mean, there would be a lot more blood. It would be more like Deep Blue Sea, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot more CGI,
right? And it's just they wouldn't take the time to like build these characters up. You wouldn't.
They definitely wouldn't have the scene in the below deck with Quentin and the other two guys.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because there's so many distinct parts. I don't know how long Jaws is, but it's pretty long, or it feels pretty long, because you've got the opening, and then you've got the setup of Roy Scheider's character, and then you've got the closing of the beach controversy and everything. And it takes forever. I don't mean that pejoratively. I think it's great. It takes its time to even get to that last bit where they're hunting the shark, which is a whole separate movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, when you do have that scene where they're talking about their old war wounds and things like that, that's how you get the payoff. That's how you get Quentin dying, is just like, holy shit, how can they kill that character?
Yeah.
He's been like this touchstone of this movie so far.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that has been completely lost for the most part in modern day movies.
Yeah.
And movies, frankly, that's even through the 80s, 90s, and so on, it's just gotten progressively worse. But they forget about that. They forget about these scenes, how they build things up.
Mm-hmm.
They want to take the essences of these movies and make them into this with the essence of it, but they don't ever think about the whole movie is the equation. It's not just these little details that they think made Jaws a success.
Yeah.
So
Jaws essence.
Yes.
Yeah, you need the essence of Jaws. The other thing I was going to ask you guys about, like, everything was subversive. We've talked about like how endings and things like that. Even the comedy was subversive.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned in a previous podcast how Blazing Saddles couldn't be made.
Oh yeah.
Today.
Hell no.
And there's some weird shit happening in the 70s. You got Blazing Saddles, another Mel Brooks, Young Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
You got even Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
A weird fucking movie.
Holy Grail,
and Life of Brian too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I wonder, is Life of Brian something that you can make these days?
No.
No.
No, right?
Nope.
There's no chance.
Nope. Because the problem is that and they still to this day don't, by the way, get the overall gist of that movie.
Yeah.
And the point is that people are stupid, and that they're the ones who are worshiping this guy who's not Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the point of the movie.
Yeah.
And that all the stuff, because we've mentioned this before, there's a part where they actually show Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And there's people who are listening to him and everything, and it's completely different from what's happening in the actual movie though, where they've
Big nose.
yeah, exactly, where they've decided this guy is Jesus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you came out with this today, it would be just like what you have with Last Temptation of Christ and all that. Where I mean, that movie didn't get a chance either. I mean, it was in 1987. That didn't get a chance.
Right.
So anything that has this, I don't know, it seems like heresy or whatever, they wouldn't come out with that movie. No.
But people still watch those, like those specifically, Blazing Saddles and Life of Brian. People still watch them today for the first time and enjoy them.
They do.
Is it just because it's like a time capsule, basically, and you could get away with more at that point?
I think that might be some of it.
Yeah, I think it might be.
I think you subconsciously, realize that you're watching, especially something, from the 70s. You can't help
it's
but
gotta look.
like when I was a really little kid, I was a snobby motherfucker. Like if I saw a TV show or a movie on and I could tell the clothes and the cars were from the 70s, I was like, fuck that old shit. I'm gonna go watch Back to the Future again. Luckily, I grew out of that. But yeah, no. It was also a big decade, I think I'm noticing a trend here, bucking the system and not giving a shit. But like horror had a huge decade because you had shit like Halloween and Alien and The Exorcist and The Omen.
Yeah.
And I mean, now in the 80s, horror really takes a dive off a cliff hard and plunks at the bottom.
Again, by the way, taking the stuff from the 70s and just making it into this is what you like, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly the what we saw in the 80s was in Halloween, which is a horror movie that takes its time. You don't see that ever.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Horror movie that takes its time, has a lot of suspense to it and all that. People took Halloween and said, "Oh, you like the masked killer with the murders and everything, right? We will give you all that and more. Just continue. We'll just give that to you in every scene now. Just lots of deaths.
Yes,
and
we want deaths and
no
boobs.
suspense.
Yes.
Nothing that makes any sense. Yeah, boobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of boobs. It's kind of crazy looking at the movies in the 80s, man. It's like 70s vomit.
Yeah.
Because you see all these movies that are trying to be those movies in the 70s and they think they know what it is. Do you guys understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Like they don't look at the whole picture. They just look at, check boxes of what things people liked, and they don't really delve into what made those check boxes so great.
You can make an argument that 70s was peak horror.
Yeah.
Actually, because in the 60s you had Psycho, obviously, and you had a few of the, Hitchcock things. I don't remember. I mean, Suspiria came out in the 70s, The Omen, all the stuff that Jeremy mentioned. Straw Dogs is kind of horror. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, the stuff from this decade is what has been allowing horror to skate mainstream horror. The modern horror guys would probably argue with this, but mainstream horror has been skating off of this peak for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Only just now is it really kind of getting back its swagger, right?
Yeah.
In the last, 3-4 years, it feels like there have been a good handful, even if I didn't like all of them. Obviously, The Witch struck people in a positive way.
Yeah.
It Follows, and then this year we had Get Out and It, and I think there's a little bit of a resurgence. I just, are we going to do the same thing? Are we going to learn the wrong lessons all over again? We need red balloons and sewers. That's exactly what made it work.
Clowns.
Yeah.
If you put a clown in there, it's going to be scary. This is exactly what I mentioned about the American Horror Story. It's a bunch of clowns with freaky masks.
Well,
that's not what freaks you out.
And I'm already worried about, because, Stranger Things, I have not seen the show.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard enough from people like you two and others to know that I will love it when I watch it. But between that and It and then the 80s era Bumblebee Transformers spinoff, I feel like we're a little 80s nostalgia out. Like, I think they're legitimately studios were looking at Stranger Things and went, we got to do more 80s nostalgia.
Absolutely.
And it's just, why do they always learn the wrong lessons? Why?
I don't know, because it makes... Yeah, I mean, you're missing the point of why these things are successful, critically acclaimed, make money, and I don't know.
I think what you're seeing, the reason why you're seeing these interesting movies that are starting to come out now, though, is you have a wider distribution net than you used to. used to be you had to make a movie and you had to hope to get it into theaters or at least get it into a home video store of some sort. Now you've got Netflix, you've got Hulu, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got you still have, movie theaters, and you still have all the old media or whatever. Now I think you have companies who are deciding, you know what, we can't let every awesome idea walk out of our doors now. We have to compete with these Amazons and Netflixes and everything. And we have to sort of up our game, or else they're going to take all the good stuff and we're going to be left with, according to Jim.
Yeah.
And
well, what you're talking about has already happened on network television. Not necessarily with the Hollywood studios and film, but like whenever I read about a new show with an actor I like or a premise I like, as soon as I find out it's on CBS, I'm like, fuck it. I don't care. I'm not watching that.
Yeah.
Because at this point, they're already only getting after Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu turn you down. Then you go to TNT, TBS, or AMC. And after they turn you down, you end up at ABC, NBC, or CBS.
Which is a total reversal.
Total reversal. I remember when Fox technically started being called the fourth network because it was an upstart, basically. It came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the networks had all the power back then. And the cable companies didn't even produce their own shows.
Yep.
They didn't even try.
Yeah, exactly. And then I don't know what exactly was it AMC that really sort of broke that through after
I think so. Breaking Bad.
I don't really think they were the first to come out with original programming, but you could see that it could be done well.
FX did The Shield
FX was a
Rescue Me, and those were both critically acclaimed. And those, I think, both started before Breaking Bad. But I think Breaking Bad is the one that's the reason we now have stuff like the first season of True Detective or Fargo, the TV show. That was Breaking Bad was the one that said we can do cinematic, short-run television miniseries, basically, film quality work here on this cable network, and they're going to leave us alone.
Yeah,
and don't forget, Mad Men was running right around the same time.
Mad Men just came out just before Breaking Bad,
and The Walking Dead right around there too. I mean, they hit like the perfect trifecta. Whoever was running AMC at that point is a fucking genius.
I saw a headline the other day that said Walking Dead ratings are down, but it doesn't matter. It's such a juggernaut.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like the NFL, basically. Like, people tune in regardless. Oh, Walking Dead is on? All right.
Well, so this decade is the 70s is kind of like what we have going on, maybe at the beginnings of it now, and thank God it needs to happen. But in the 70s, studios were not owned by these huge corporations. Remember, in this day and age, Universal's owned by Comcast. Columbia Pictures and TriStar's owned by Sony. You have Warner Brothers, which is Time Warner.
Yeah.
All these companies and Disney.
Paramount is owned by CBS.
Yeah, Paramount. Yeah. So I mean, you have all these studios that aren't really being run by movie people. They're being run by the cash that's above them, and they look at movie studios as basically a cash drain. They don't look at it as we need to come out with these great movies or anything like that. That's why you see, 5 Transformers movies, and that's why you see another Fast and the Furious coming out.
Because this is what they're doing. They're doing math. They're doing economics, really. Because when I worked for, both Regal, it was a smaller document at Regal, but at Kroger, a monthly, what they call the P&L, the profit and loss statement for the store, was massive. It was like 30 pages of numbers that I would have a monthly call where I have to answer for these numbers. Why is the EBITDA down 1.2%?
The EBITDA?
Okay. Yeah, earnings before interest, tax, and amortization. I can't believe I remembered that.
Drop some fucking knowledge,
I can't believe I remembered that. And, that my boss would be sitting in a room looking at numbers. Now, he would maybe once a month come into my store, meet my people, see my customers, talk to me face to face. But the majority of the judgment on how good my store was being run was being done by looking at numbers in an office far away. And they're just doing the same thing now with films. Oh, Transformers 4 made, yes, just like Walking Dead. It dipped off from Transformers 3, but it still made $800 million. So we're not going to stop now. Let's make 12 more.
Emoji Movie made $212 million.
Exactly.
So,
and, I can't fault that. It's very much like the Peyton Manning leaving the Colts. Like, I felt bad. I love Peyton Manning. I kept following after that, but that was the right decision for the Colts to make at that point. You didn't know if his neck was fragile or not. It was a business decision, but it sucked, but it was so I understand why they're doing that. They have board members they have to, report back to who want to know why the profits aren't up. It's just, the art is slowly being squeezed out into the sides, and it's going to basically just be independence versus studio trash here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that in the 70s, I mean, there were still studios owned by big corporations back in the 70s. I think Gulf plus Western or whatever owned either Paramount or I don't know when that happened. I don't know when this like wave of corporations started coming in and buying all the studios. But just now, just know that, it's not usually Paramount. It's the company behind the company that's making all the decisions and everything.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind, which I'm glad I didn't say, because grimy and all the crime and stuff we talked about for the last hour is way better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things I do think about when I think about 70s movies is John Travolta's career.
Uh-huh.
Because he's in Carrie, and then you have Grease and Saturday Night Fever right at the end of the decade. Because there was still plenty of, disco was still very popular in the mid to late 70s, and I think movies represented that way outside just Saturday Night Fever. But this is where John Travolta began.
No, that's a good point. I was actually thinking about all the music movies that came out in this decade, because he had Rocky Horror Picture Show, Willy Wonka, Grease, Saturday Night Fever. Even because Grease obviously was set in a different era, so it was a little bit lighter, even though it had some pretty heavy themes in it too.
I'll tell you what, I thought that movie was shot in the 50s until I was like 18, just because I'm dumb.
Well, no, I mean it's got a perfect look for it,
Yeah, it does.
But even Saturday Night Fever as being keeping in the theme of this decade it's remembered for the dance, but it's a gritty fucking movie about this dude like in New York that is trying to get by, and he's getting into conflicts and he's getting into fights and things like that, and the dance floor is where he can basically escape. And man, I mean it's so much fun to dive into these things that are known for something. Something I just brought up, Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka is known as this fantastical thing about a chocolate factory. There's some weird shit in that thing. Where not only the boat ride, but Gene Wilder's whole character, the fact that kids are pretty much dying. The whole weird setup that they had at the beginning, where all the grandparents are in one room and like sleeping together.
I still don't know why those Ravagers and Guardians 2 have to sleep together, like in a whole mess of people.
Yeah, man.
It's like our ship has many rooms, but we only need one for
Jeremy, they got super blackout drunk during that party, man, and they all fell on the floor together. It's what happens.
Exactly.
You don't talk about what happens in the Ravager bridge
what happens on a Ravager ship stays on the Ravager ship.
Well, that Baby Groot run wild. One thing that is a trickle-down effect from the 70s is the disaster movie. I was just watching The Towering Inferno a few weeks ago.
It's good stuff.
What a fucking cast.
Another movie that's not trying to rush anything. That building is on fire for like 2.5 straight hours.
It makes perfect sense.
Poseidon Adventures in the 70s, right?
Yep. Poseidon Adventure, all the
Airport 77 with Jack Lemmon. All the best disaster movies, for the most part, are in the 70s.
Yeah.
And everything that's tried to emulate them since. You've got your Devlin and what's his name? Emmerich. Like Independence Day style disaster, or 2012, or Geostorm.
Well, the thing about those movies is just that they are so hooked on the spectacle of seeing a city getting destroyed that there isn't anything else after that. It's really just. What are the latest special effects today?
Yeah.
Let's do that on this movie, and whereas these movies that you're talking about in the 70s, they actually put some characters in there. I'm sure back in the 70s they were considered almost like Emmerich movies or something because of the whatever. But but you look back on it now. There's such a difference between those disaster movies and what we see now, which everything is just focused on the destruction.
Well, it's kind of similar to the Die Hard issue, right? Where like Airport 77, Towering Inferno, and Poseidon Adventure are all confined spaces. whereas like Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones is the entire city of Los Angeles. And so they sort of lost what made, because like I think Airport 77, the plane goes down in the ocean and it's at the floor of the ocean, underwater, and they've got to try and get people out into the surface.
Oh, really?
Before they die. I'm pretty sure that's the plot. It's one of those movies.
Yeah, they kind of blend in.
We lose all. Not Airplane, which is parodying these movies,
right.
stays in that kind of confined location, but yeah, good call on the disaster movies. All
Yeah.
the good ones are from the 70s.
Towering Inferno is exactly that. It's not focused on the destruction. It's not focused necessarily on the disaster, even though a fuck ton of people die.
Oh yeah,
in that movie. Like 200 people die. But then you had these powerful leads. It's interesting. I wonder how it was received when it came out in the 70s, because Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Fred Astaire, and a million other people that I'm forgetting right now. Like, these are heavy hitters. These are well-respected, actors, and they're acting. Like, they've got characters, and they've got time to introduce them and things like that. And it's thrilling each time. Like, it's not everybody gets off or nobody gets off. There's like little pockets that escape via elevators. Ones that go on the stairs. There's some that slide off into the into the second building.
Segment with the window where they're trying to like brace the window, but like it's almost like the Lost World cliff scene where shit just keeps going wrong like 5 times in a row, and I think ultimately the window breaks and wind starts pouring in. I really like the Towering Inferno.
I do too.
It's a good movie.
I actually like the Poseidon Adventure too. Gene Hackman was in Poseidon Adventure, wasn't he?
Ernest Borgnine.
Hackman has a case for owning this decade, by the way, too. He was in fucking Young Frankenstein. I forgot he was in Young Frankenstein.
Yep. Well, he has a cameo. And
didn't you say Coppola wrote Patton?
Yes.
Because Patton came out in the 70s.
Well, actually, no. Coppola wrote it, not Coppola.
Oh, sorry. I buy his wine. I can say his name however the fuck I want. So, yeah, I think it's probably still going to be Coppola.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
who owns the decade.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't think there. I mean, you have people like Friedkin and Spielberg and Hal Ashby and a lot of these people who try to sort of like aim for that ownership of the decade. But Coppola really has just more. I don't know, just more movies.
This was his decade, and that was basically his last decade too.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
he was a huge flash. We were talking about Pacino and De Niro when we were talking about the actors Mount Rushmore. Pacino has a very good case of being kind of the main person of this decade between the Godfathers and Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico and shit like that. But he was closely associated with Coppola, And then, as we talked about with the actors Mount Rushmore, De Niro and Pacino in particular went way downhill in the 80s, and it took until the 90s to really like build them back up again. So there's something about this decade that I think one of the things I wrote down about like almost like the tropes or the downfall of this whole thing is that you ever been drunk or like been on drugs where like you hit the peak and everything is awesome. You're like fucking Billy Crudup in Almost Famous.
Yeah.
I'm on drugs. Yeah. And then you start coming down and everything's just like, oh, shit. Yeah. And I think that was the early 80s was that oh, shit moment. But everybody's high as fuck in the 70s.
By the way, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to read this from Pauline Kael in when she reviewed the Towering Inferno. Mm-hmm. It goes kind of where I thought it would go. Pauline Kael was one of those greatest critics that that has ever critiqued. So in the new disaster blockbuster, The Towering Inferno, each scene of a person horribly in flames is presented as a feat for our delectation. The picture practically stops for us to say, "Yummy, that's a good one."
I don't think she liked it.
These incendiary deaths, plus the falls from high up in the 138th floor tallest skyscraper in the world, are, in fact, the film's only feats. The plot and characters being retreads from the producer Irwin Allen's earlier Poseidon adventure. What was left out of this time was the hokey fun. So she liked the Poseidon adventure.
Okay.
When a picture has any kind of entertainment in it, viewers don't care about credibility, but when it isn't entertaining, we do. And when a turkey bores us and insults our intelligence for close to 3 hours, it shouldn't preen itself on its own morality.
Jesus Christ.
This is why Pauline Kael's the fucking best, man.
She is right. This movie is fucking 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah,
or
like
that.
it's insane. Inferno knocks off some 200 people as realistically as it possibly
That's the
can.
same number you threw out a second ago.
Yeah. And then tells us that we must plan future buildings more carefully.
It literally does that. Like a character, I think it's Paul Newman.
It
He's
is.
like, oh, I'm going to check with the fire codes before.
Well, he's like the building.
Yeah, he's
No,
the architect.
Well, it says with the fire chief embodied here by Steve McQueen, working in collaboration with the architect, in this case, Paul Newman, who appears to be also the only engineer. In fact, the only person involved in the building's construction or operation above the level of janitor. The film asks us to believe that until the skyscraper's official opening day, the busy Newman never noticed that the contractors and subcontractors had cheated on just about everything. It asks us to believe that this tallest building in the world, a golden glass tower that's a miracle of flimsiness, as it turns out, would have been set down in San Francisco, of all places. It asks us to accept Richard Chamberlain as a rat-fink electrical contractor and as the city's leading roue.
Uh-huh.
This gives one visions too. But then this is a movie in which Fred Astaire, an escort to Jennifer Jones, needs a rented tuxedo. I don't know how she knows that.
I missed that part.
She goes on for 3 more paragraphs on it, but the Towering Inferno was looked upon as that,
That's interesting.
that type of what we look at with 2012 and all that. But I would just love to know what she thought of 2012.
No.
Oh, yeah, I want to hear that
kidding.
woman's review.
Well, she was long gone by
I know,
then,
I know.
but I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, that
What's
was
funny is I don't
priceless.
remember it being effects driven. In fact, like the big blockbuster, I guess obviously Star Wars was, but a lot of that stuff obviously was practical.
Mm-hmm.
But Jaws, there's the famous story about how the shark wouldn't work and things
Yep.
like that, where you had so much realism in this that you couldn't rely on the spectacle like 2012 or Independence Day even or things like that. And I think that's why those things don't hold up. Obviously, they don't have the story. But Towering Inferno, Jeremy and I were just reminiscing on it because we enjoyed it. Because you got to know the characters instead of just the spectacle. Apparently, she did.
Yeah, I mean, back then that was like a 2012 that came out at the time.
You talk about practical effects, like the little Star Wars ships, and the other day I walked in the house with my Starship Enterprise drone.
Uh-huh.
I held it up to my wife and I said, "The ship was this big, as small as a model." But yeah, all those Star Wars ships are teeny tiny little models, and I don't think they make them. Well, I guess J.J. Abrams did a lot of practical. In Force
Yeah, I
Awakens.
think so.
Yeah.
In fact, they went out of their way to try to be practical. Even the little dinner or whatever she makes, where she drops the water in the thing. And they even made that practical.
Well, and then they fucking invented BB-8.
Yeah, yeah.
So that he could be real.
By the
movie looks
and that's
so
another
good.
reason why practical, I think, should be used more often, is because they find ways to do things.
It pushes you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so much easier, and unfortunately these days cheaper most often, to say let's just let the CGI guys cover that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not there. It's not, even as the greatest effects are not where people think they should be. You
No.
know? Unless it's in context, like It was great effects done by our buddy Aaron Sims.
Yeah.
But great effects because in context and in the dark and things like that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense for the Dark Tower to have this demon that just jumps out of nowhere and, has a big effects showpiece for no reason whatsoever in the character.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Thor Ragnarok recently, all right?
Mhm.
They had to have Chris Hemsworth and the guy that plays Loki and Anthony Hopkins all in the same place to shoot that cliff scene.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Presumably they got them all together in L.A.
Uh-huh.
and shot on a green screen. Now, how much do you think it would cost to fly those 3 people over to fucking Norway, or even Maine's cliff version of Norway, or there's got to be cliffs in the U.S. somewhere. I went to Canada. There's cliffs up in Prince Edward Island. Go fly up there for what? $1,500 a ticket?
Mm-hmm.
Couple of nights in a hotel. Still probably was cheaper to do the green screen. That's the problem.
Well, I think it's. I'm more cynical than you are, Jeremy.
That's rare.
I think it's more laziness than it is. And I'm not blaming like Taika Waititi or any of these people for that. I'm blaming like studio and the way things are, where you have to have this release date. You have to have all these. You can't just make a movie and like, well, okay, maybe in a couple weeks we'll have it. Whatever. You have to have it on this release date or else.
That was the funny thing about the dissolution of the Dark Universe for Paramount or Universal, right? Because there was one little clip in that release where Universal's head was saying, like, we're going to take our time on the next movie. We're really going to try to like develop this universe when everybody knows that it just sucks and they're just going to scrap it. You know?
It's dead now from what I hear.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at on that is that I think that with special effects, I think the special effects actually cost about the same as it does to make practical stuff. It's just that it's easier for a director at this point to say, oh, we can just get special effects guys to do this. I don't think it has much to do with cost, really. We think it does, but I don't think it does. I think it's more about, it's easier to just let somebody on a computer do this. And that's why stuff like that happens. Instead of flying them all out there, which you're right, it would have been no cost at all, really, to them in the bottom line. Instead, though, they're like, well, we really want to go all the way out that way to do that and everything. Why don't we just do it here? And they're putting movies out like this constantly now where, I would be embarrassed to have that in my movie.
Yeah.
I would be embarrassed, but now it doesn't matter. People just kind of forgive that type of thing.
How long is that movie? It's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, something.
I read today that there was a scene when they first get back to Asgard at the end on the Rainbow Bridge. Spoilers for the next 30 seconds. Hulk, Loki, and Thor all jump out and land on the Rainbow Bridge together, and Hulk just goes and punches Loki off to the side like thousands of yards away like he did in the Avengers. And the director, God love him, made a great movie, was like, we had to cut it for time, even though all the pre-early audiences loved it. Like, for time, that's a 30-second bit. And you said everybody loved it. I can find 30 seconds in this movie for you to cut. It's Jeff Goldblum talking.
I don't think I'll ever understand that 30 seconds. Got to cut 30 seconds from a movie. And you have, nowadays you have like 15 million end-credit scenes, too.
Seriously.
Okay, so this is the biggest we've ever gone off topic on one topic.
It's great. I enjoy it.
So, what else? And now let's getting into the decade of the 70s again. What do you notice about the style about the 70s? One thing that I've always noticed is, I guess every decade has especially in the when does it become normal? When do you look at a decade and go, that's normal?
It's always a decade and a half previous to what it is now.
Or is it a matter of perspective? Because in the 70s, man, the hairstyles, they were a little out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just reflective of the society at the time. But you look at like something like All the President's Men, and Dustin Hoffman has hair that looks exactly like Carl Bernstein's from the era. But I just sit there and go, how was this possible in a professional setting? How is that possible? Like, I just don't like that hair is just like unkempt and everything. Redford looks like he's above it because he doesn't look a thing like Woodward does.
Right.
Woodward had some weird fucked up 70s hair too, but Redford's like, I'm just gonna be Redford, guys. No, don't fuck around. I'm not fucking around with that Bob Woodward shit. Yeah. But like, there's a scene in that always gets me. I don't know what it is. It's they go into the library. And they want to get some information, they want to find out who checked out some books and everything. And the black guy behind the counter has got that like huge afro and sideburns and everything. And it's just like everybody's got this sort of like just very 70s specific type of hairstyle. Yeah. And they all look like unkempt and unprofessional. and like, it's just like, what kind of fucking world were we living in?
I guess the only one that escaped that was, well, he had some times where it was pretty unkempt was Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Because he had, the iconic beanie and all that stuff from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And he was a little unkempt in Five Easy Pieces.
Yeah.
But he had a hell of a decade, too. Matter
Yes,
of fact,
he did.
From he did Easy Rider in 1969.
Yep.
Matter of fact, what a weird decade he had, because he did Easy Rider. He had this wonderful run of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest where he's doing in Five Easy Pieces where he's doing these important movies. And then he ends it up with The Shining in 80.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's a hell of an 11 years right there to start off with one, I don't like Easy Rider at all, but he's definitely the best part of it. And he's certainly, the touchstone of
By the way, do need to mention that the late 60s generally is where all this 70s really starts. That's where the MPAA officially forms, is in the 60s. Movies that started coming out in the late 60s, like The Graduate and Bonnie and Clyde, I feel like every time you ask me, I have to think for a second and go, oh, yeah, it was late 60s when those came out.
Right.
But they're honorary 70s movies to me, because that's what everything that they do is sort of informs what we're going to see in the next decade. And because, that's where, I don't know what it is. I think I guess the studios or filmmakers or whatever finally just came to the powers that be and said, look, we have these great stories we want to tell, but we cannot, because of this bullshit Hays Code that we've been operating under for 30 years.
Yeah.
Can we just make something where we tell the parents what's happening in this thing before they go in and everything? And they're like, okay, changing social mores and whatnot. And because, the 60s were a big decade as far as all these people having their, awakenings moment or whatever. Not awakenings, Robin Williams, Robert De Niro, the free love and the free drugs and all that stuff, man, that I just don't know about because I didn't live in that time, man.
Peace, love, dope.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a bellwether event. Like everybody, it's the cliche to look at Altamont Music Festival as being, the end of the love generation. But it was a bellwether event. You could tell a huge difference between the late 60s or, right around the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. And a lot of it had to do with Vietnam. A lot of it had to do with political activism. A lot of it had to do with the hangover from one drug and into another class of drugs. It's such a fascinating time to look at. And of course, we weren't alive during that. But it's probably like what we're going to tell our kids about, living through the 90s and be like, oh, man, it was a whole different thing. There was ideas, man, and there was music and things like that.
And
It's
people
not like that
tied
now.
flannels around their waists like man dresses.
That's right. People were wearing long johns under shorts and shit. But it was interesting, and I think you had to have that huge event in the late 60s in order to make the art progress in the 70s.
Right. And that's where I think that's where you sort of have to base it off of, is that late 60s really where the influence starts really kicking in.
Do you want to talk about The Sting?
The Sting is great. I think we probably talked about it enough. I think
No, it's interesting. When you were talking about Grease and how you thought that was actually made in the 50s and everything, a fun game sometimes is to look at a period piece and try to figure out what decade it was made in.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's weird. You can figure it out. Sometimes it's just the actor that's in the movie. Like, oh, well, that actor was big during this time. That's the reason why I know this is the 80s. Sometimes though, it's just the way the film looks.
Yep.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about out there, but you're the people who put that weird setting on your TV that makes it look live and you don't notice any difference.
I'll tell you a good example. I was watching a little bit of Barry Lyndon the other day, and that is a very 70s looking historical piece. Even though that was the one that was shot in all natural light.
Yeah,
right?
he did something revolutionary with candlelight in that movie and all that. Yeah.
From what I was watching, I really enjoyed it, but it was really very Kubrickian, because it's almost a standard period piece tale. But he has these shots that you'll later see in The Shining and maybe a little bit in Full Metal Jacket where he'll be, a wide shot that zooms right in, to two characters or something like that. And it's really interesting. Like, you could tell not only that was a period piece shot in the 70s, but then you saw like the hallmarks of a Kubrick type of mentality on the cinematography. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's there's a certain graininess to film like that. Over the years, even when they polish it up and all that, sort of remains on these movies when you're watching them. And so even when they do a period piece, which is supposed to be very specific to that era, you start going, "Oh, this is a 70s movie." Yeah, and there's a lot of clues to that. It's either the actor or it's a lot of times I have to sit there and I just look at the sort of the grain of I can date a film sometimes just by looking at the grain of it.
Especially now that they don't have cigarette burns anymore, because you can still get some movies made in the 80s and 90s playing on TV, and you can still see the cigarette burn for the projectionist.
Oh, yeah.
And now that doesn't exist anymore.
Nope.
Because they were actually smoking cigarettes.
Well, what's funny is they kept doing it right up until they stopped using film, but the reason they originally did it was because the projectionist had to change from one projector and reel to another one, and that was there to let him know when to start making his machine move to change the reel over. But by the time Chris and I were working in theaters, we built the whole movie on a platter. We didn't have to change anything over, but they kept putting those cigarette burns on the end of each reel.
And that's the reason why was because there were still very few, but there were still a few theaters that did that change the reel thing. Fight Club sort of popularized that term as a cigarette burn, but they're really called changeover cues,
right.
And where that first one that would come up told you to start the projector, and this is when they measured everything out when they started a projector, like when we would thread a projector with what's known as leader,
right? And
so that leader would be timed out just so that when they started it, the picture would show up. Now, I mean, after that though, like you go to a theater like Hollywood 27 in the 90s or whatever, it don't matter. It's some sort of length as long as we can get to where we need to get. Who cares if a couple of frames get fucked up because we're not changing reels here. But yeah, they would do that so that everything would be lined up perfectly. So when they saw that dot, they could press start. Everything would come on, and as soon as the second dot came up, they could close the dowser and open the other one for the other one, and then that would be a real change. And if you were really good at it, it would look like a continuous stream.
Yeah, I bet it was a lot harder to get right than it sounds like. I mean, you and I could probably have done it.
Yeah.
But I bet you there were plenty of projectionists fucking that shit up.
Yeah. Oh, easily.
I bet it was common to go to the movies and get like 10.5 frames of white in between the two reels.
Yeah.
The changeover.
Nice.
Right. So, yeah. 70s movies are awesome, guys.
They are awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I always like going back to those things, because when you pop one in, there's just something just completely different, and there's something that sets me at ease about it. Maybe it's just my age. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's our age.
But I mean, we didn't see these movies obviously until much later after they came out. Yeah.
That's true. I think once we all started loving movies, though, we still hadn't quite gotten into that era where just there was this lack of care. Because remember, the 90s is the next big decade of like independent film and everything. So we're in a perfect age to like know what a good movie is. Whatever. You motherfuckers born after the 90s don't know what a good movie is. You guys are dicks. you guys, you're the reason why this entire society is crumbling. Just kidding. You have to couch it sometimes.
Oh, yes.
You have to couch it because people don't know. They don't know. You're kidding.
They don't know.
So it's time to talk about HelloFresh again.
HelloFresh.
Hello. It is the way to get very good meals through the mail.
Yeah.
And they actually tell you how to cook it and give you all the ingredients and everything.
They give you the portions of the ingredients you need.
Yes.
And it's usually 30 minutes or less, these recipes. And now, just in time for the holiday season,
yeah, baby,
they've got some special holiday recipes.
We're there. We're right in the middle of the holidays. You can't deny it. It's here. Winter is coming.
Why exactly? Why beat somebody over the head for that last turkey when you can call HelloFresh?
That's exactly
Stop beating ass.
That's exactly how it happened.
Stop being the Terminator out there.
Like the end of Jingle All the Way, only with turkeys.
Yeah, exactly. Because you know what's happening out there. It's chaos out there,
You know what's
guys. People
happening.
are hitting people over the heads
It's
over
everywhere.
the turkeys. But yeah, there's a lot of like really cool things that they're coming out with for the holidays too.
Yeah, and if you've got, the holidays are a busy time, right? Everybody's bustling all over the place, running around, picking up these kids, dropping off these people, picking up relatives, making up the bed in the guest room. You've got less free time in holiday season than you typically would, which makes HelloFresh even more convenient at that time of year. And that's why they're doing special, like, holiday, warm home cooked feeling kind of meals.
That's right.
Like I got my eye on this meatloaf a la mom.
Yeah.
Yeah?
You can't go wrong with that.
Roasted root vegetables and thyme gravy. Now,
Yeah.
gravy I like. You don't even have to do anything to it. And I'm in. You put gravy in the conversation, and I'm listening. But
Yeah.
thyme gravy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
meatloaf a la mom.
I'm down.
I'm
know.
getting that one for sure.
They've even got an apple cranberry stuffing.
Ooh.
That's right.
Ooh.
That's right. They're not messing around,
Ooh.
man.
Oh my god.
And man, these things come like, freezer packed in, right to your door. You just unbox it. They've got like super easy to follow directions.
Yeah.
On how to like chop, zest, carve, all that stuff. Saute.
all those weird cooking terms, they got you.
Like
they got
knifing and spooning.
Yes.
They'll show you how to spoon.
Right.
Melon balling.
Yes. There it is on a card, how to melon ball.
You take a melon baller and insert it into melon and
Yes.
twist.
Indeed.
Someone's like, oh.
That's
how
I
you
thought it was
do
a
it.
tiny ice cream.
You know what? Another holiday themed one here that is like I just want to order it right now
Mhm.
is figgy pork tenderloin with green beans and rosemary potatoes.
Fig. That sounds
It
figalicious.
sounds outstanding.
Yes.
It sounds like you will have a good Thanksgiving or whatever day you decide to order this.
Yeah.
When you cook up the figgy pork
They
tenderloin.
didn't call it fig pork tenderloin.
That's right.
It's figgy.
Figgy.
There-
That's
It's
right.
getting figgy with it.
Hey, indeed. Hey, it's holidays, okay? You got to get figgy with it.
Well, they're going to change the lyrics in the song to bring us some figgy tenderloin.
Of course they are. Of course they are, because that's how awesome this
They're
is.
also going to change the lyrics to the Will Smith song.
Yes.
Yeah.
Na 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 na. Get figgy with it. What's our URL? People want to hop on this train. What's the URL for
It's
them?
HelloFresh.com. Just go right to the website.
Okay.
Enter when you get to the checkout portion. Enter SinCast 30. You get $30 off your first week of shopping.
Wow.
That is significant, folks.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
is.
lot of dough going into this. It's not actual dough.
I love
It's
the
money.
way you roll your eyes in like micro fashion when you say something that you think, man, there's probably a better word. That was a little punny. And you do this little microsecond and then you move on. And it's just, I don't want to sound weird, but it's adorable.
It's years of saying stupid stuff and realizing it mid-sentence. But yes, go to HelloFresh.com, SinCast 30, $30 off your first order. Man, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Check it out. And we enjoyed it. And we hope you do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, you want to do some questions?
Let's do some questions.
I got something to say. I want the truth.
I am listening.
We got really good ones. I'm excited about these questions.
That's never a good sign for me.
Really?
Yeah.
By the way, go to Facebook, go to SoundCloud, go to email, go to Twitter, submit these questions, Reddit. We are looking at all of those things, and we're pulling from the best of the best, so definitely keep those coming. First one is, what is the best use of anachronism on film? This person gave the example of the 90s-ness of Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is good. Yeah.
Exactly. So the movie I'm about to come up with here, there's going to be a lot of people out there who say that's not a period piece. But I think it's so conflicted that you can still infer that it's an anachronism. So Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which of course by the end of it you see modern day cops pulling it, like arresting people and everything.
Yeah.
The problem, if you take that seriously, is that there's so much real medieval time stuff going on.
Yes.
Now, maybe it's a comment on 1970s England, for all I know. Like there's real medieval like towns going on and people who act that way.
Yes, there actually is large weddings for like swamp castles and shit like that.
Yeah.
And there's a Grail-shaped beacon at the top of
Yes, exactly. I honestly think they came up with that thing at like last minute or something and just said, let's just end this with the cops arresting everybody because like that makes no sense whatsoever.
No, I hate that ending.
That's an anachronism in itself, but the thing that I'm thinking about is the holy hand grenade. I believe the holy hand grenade is an anachronism that is a beautiful part of this movie, and it just makes it better. Everything from the guy going through the scripture to read the thing about how to use the holy hand grenade to them using it and it does fucking nothing is a fantastic part of that movie, and it's a better movie for having that anachronism in it.
What I love about that, I love every part of that scene, but what I love most about it is that that's the first fucking time that has come up.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we can't risk another frontal attack. That rabbit's dynamite. And he's like, what can we do? I don't know. We do have the holy hand grenade.
Yeah. There's like
they've had a contingent like following them with Brother Maynard.
Well, that's the thing. There's this large group of people that are off screen during this movie. Like they're like, who did we lose in that? And they're like, they rattle off all the, like Gawain and like all these different like literary knights and everything. Like Gawain. So yeah, that's another funny part about that movie. Anyway.
That's so great.
I don't like my answer for this question.
Oh yeah,
I got two, but I don't think either one really works. That Walkman in Guardians, I'm not asking for much, man. Just turn it over once and show me some kind of whiz popper from planet Xandar that he glued on the back that powers that thing.
Yeah.
Because, well, and even not power, I think like we said, I think you wrote this, Chris, but in the Guardians 2 video, even if he's got power, those fucking things broke all the time.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
They broke constantly. And his is working perfectly 30 years after he took it off of Earth? Give me a break.
Yeah, and he hasn't gone back to Earth, and it's not like all the planets in the universe are selling AA's.
Right. There's not like a space batteries plus.
Right.
Like
I mean, they have magical batteries, like what Rocket steals from the gold.
Again,
people.
you just want to attach one of those fuckers to the back of the Walkman, then my complaints start to go away.
Right.
Yep.
And well, apparently they had a hard time finding Walkmans for that too.
Oh, yeah.
They had to I think the prop guy had to like build a new Walkman or something for that because they couldn't find a real
Well, they're like $600 now to get an actual Walkman.
I guarantee you I've got one in my garage.
Do you really?
I guarantee you.
Wow. I have a Discman.
I never got one of those. I wasn't clever or wealthy enough. I never had one of those. But yeah, I got nothing. The only other one I thought of is not really quite a good answer, but in Wonder Boys, which is this movie I love, Michael Douglas plays this author who's had one hit, and it's been 10 years, and he's working on his follow-up, and everybody's asking him about it. But he insists on typing on a typewriter from like the 50s.
Yep.
Which this movie takes place in and came out in, I think, the late 90s. Early 2000. So, even if you're a 50-year-old, if you had a hit novel and you're a professor at a university, you know how to type on a damn computer. You're using Word or you're using whatever Apple's version of Word was in 2000. It does set up that great gag at the end when Robert Downey Jr. crashes the car and all 2,000 pages of his book go flying out all over the place.
Especially with him like picking up like random pieces of paper and showing it.
Downey's
I got that
one. And they have this whole conversation in the car where the guy's asking him, that's the only copy you had? You didn't have a backup copy? Anyway, it's always bothered me. It felt like a little bit of an easy character trait, like characterization through, some cheap, I only use old.
Yeah.
Pluck, I only use old typewriters because I prefer the tactile. You're a writer. You don't love the sound of a goddamn typewriter. You like the words.
Yeah.
Jesus. Sorry, I'm done.
Now, I mean, I will say, as far as this question is concerned, they're asking what makes the movie better. And also, now, I guess I would say that's anachronistic that he does that. And I'm not sure if it's an anachronism, though. to have a typewriter in the year 2000.
No.
I think it's more of an anachronism if they had, a computer like a laptop in 1943.
Yeah.
That would be more of an anachronism. But I think the definition can be expanded here to say it's anachronistic for him to use a typewriter. It's anachronistic for Star-Lord to be listening to a Walkman when there's probably a million different kinds of,
I mean, right at home at my house, I have a little thing that cost me $8. I can put a cassette tape in it and turn it into a digital file. USB into my computer. There's no space version of that shit. Digitize that shit. You don't even have to carry around a bit. Fucking.
Well, now he has a Zune.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
That's lovely.
I'm glad the listener actually mentioned Mel Brooks, the Men in Tights in the 90s version of that. I always love the stuff in Spaceballs, which is so 80s.
Yep.
No better example than when they lose Vespa and Lone Star. Like they go into hyperspace and they can't, or they overshoot them with the ludicrous speed, right? And so they completely lose who they're tracking. And he's talking, Dark Helmet's talking to his officer, and he's like, "What can we do?" And they're like, "Oh, we have the videotape." And so they go and then they reveal all of these VHS tapes, and they're all Mel Brooks movies. It's Blazing Saddles and like Silent Movie and stuff like that. And they're like, Spaceballs the movie. And Dark Helmet's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then they have this whole thing of like, we can find them by skipping ahead in the movie. But then they finally get to the point in the movie where it's them, and they're talking about, this is us now.
Yeah.
The now is happening now. But I always thought it was hilarious to have a VHS setup in this super futuristic movie.
Right.
Mel Brooks does that really, really well. Oh, this is fun. I'm going to not do this in a British accent. Ahoy from jolly old Blighty, which is England. I've never heard England referred to as jolly old Blighty.
I haven't either. We learn something new every day.
Really feel like I've grown as a person. Love your vids and your podcast. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you guys had any pick-me-up films that you also go to if you're feeling particularly down or need something to help you along in the day. This person watches Jeremy's favorite, The Court Jester, and also says it's a mad, 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 mad world, which is a great one to pick him up. What do you guys think?
I do this most often with Frasier and Friends and Seinfeld episodes.
It's like a happy place, right?
Whether it's need inspiration or I'm just kind of down and I want to pick me up or something that's going to get me laughing. But for a movie answer, I'd say Galaxy Quest, which thankfully is playing on Stars like crazy lately.
Yeah,
so
it's
been on in my house a bunch because every beat of that film works perfectly for me. It's funny. Every section, every scene has big laughs. It's my feel good place. I think it's partly because I'm such a Trek fan, and this is such a brilliant skewering but tribute. So Galaxy Quest is my answer.
I've got to say that normally I probably don't just go and watch a movie when I'm down. But if I were down and I were to pop a movie in, it would be The Shawshank Redemption. I never failed to feel good after watching that movie. Now if you're down and you're watching it, there might be some disturbing things for you to have to sit through to get to that point, to get to the ending of it. But I think ultimately though, you especially if you've seen it before, you're gonna pop that thing in and you're gonna feel good by the end of it, like that message of hope, and that it's exactly the opposite of what we were talking about with these 70s movies. It has an uplifting ending. Don't
throw in Taxi Driver.
How would do not watch Taxi Driver. That is correct. How would Shawshank Redemption play in the 70s? They would have made that completely different.
Oh yeah. Probably even more disturbing.
Yeah, it would be extremely disturbing. But for some real good feel good moments, Shawshank Redemption would be mine.
Yeah, I've got a weird one that always seems to be playing on TNT or something like that late at night. Wedding Crashers. And I know you guys aren't a huge fan of this movie, but every part of that makes me smile. There's a tiny little downturn where Owen Wilson kind of goes off on his own and tries to crash weddings by himself. But everything before that is Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn just playing off of each other really, I think, beautifully. Like they have a really good chemistry.
Mhm.
They're all like, hyping each other up and everything, even when they're angry at each other. There's this scene where after Vince Vaughn has been kind of violated by the son who has a crush on him, he goes down and there's this huge breakfast buffet and he's pissed off. And Owen Wilson's like, I just need a little more time, hang with me and everything. And he starts just piling up his plate with every fucking thing on this breakfast buffet. And then like, sausages and like this and all this stuff. It's this huge stack. And then he just fucking pours maple syrup over the top of it. He's like, I'm going to recharge the batteries. I'll come back and we'll do this. And he's like, oh yeah. And then they're friends again and everything. And just everything works for me on that. Like Isla Fisher and Christopher Walken and even Rachel McAdams, Bradley Cooper, Owen Wilson, Vince Vaughn, Will Ferrell in the cameo towards the end. Like that just makes me smile every time.
Isla Fisher is the best part of that movie for me.
She is hilarious.
She's so funny in that. She sold me just on the trailer alone when she's like got that crazy ass laugh,
she's like, "Don't run,
'cause
from me.
I'll come find you."
Come find you.
And she's like,
she's got that scene where like they initially want to leave, or Vince Vaughn wants to leave, and he's like, "I need more time. We'll go to their house and everything." And she goes to ask Christopher Walken, her dad. And you can tell that they're arguing. She starts holding her breath and like stomping.
yeah.
And then she has that great turn where she's just like, I wasn't a virgin, I just thought that's what guys like to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vince Vaughn, like, she's got a screw loose. And you know what? I dig it.
Yeah.
All right. What are your favorite underrated hero monologues in a movie where the villain gets their satisfying comeuppance?
Oh, man. I don't know if this qualifies as a monologue, considering the fact there are two people involved in this. So it would be more of a dialogue, but there is one person in charge of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin in The Edge.
Nice.
And they are tearing into some David Mamet dialogue here. David Mamet doing a big adventure picture.
Such a good movie.
He's like, Anthony Hopkins is trying to get Alec Baldwin to get excited about killing this bear and everything because, you're going to have to do it, man. This bear is going to kill us if we don't kill him first.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, Anthony Hopkins is like, I'm going to kill the bear. Say it. And he's like, I'm going to kill the bear. Say it. He keeps saying, I'm going to kill the bear. Say it. And Alec Baldwin's like, I'm going to kill the bear. And then he's like, I'm going to kill the bear. Say it again. Say it again. He's like, I'm going to kill the bear. And then it's like, he's like, good. What one man can do, another man can do. What one man can do, another man can do. And Alec Baldwin comes back and says, what one man can do, another man can do. What one man can do. And then finally, Anthony Hopkins, this is the part that sells it. This is the part that tells you you're going to go fucking kill that bear. He's like, yeah, you goddamn right. Today, I'm going to kill the motherfucker. Listening to Anthony Hopkins say the word motherfucker is the best. Today, I'm going to kill the motherfucker. Is the best fucking thing. It's actually in the trailer. Of course, that was one of those where they cut it off and it's so funny, blah, 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 because they cut off the swear word. But I was like, I'm kind of intrigued with this movie. Anthony Hopkins going to drop an F-bomb. It's pretty nice.
That's a great movie. I like it. I'm gonna go with Michael Clayton. Because the final little talk that George Clooney has with
Tilda Swinton.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Is so satisfying and cathartic. And I think I've already spoiled this movie before. It's not a brand new movie, but basically Michael Clayton is a fixer for a law firm, and somebody drives drunk, one of the lawyers for the firm or one of their clients, what have you. They send out Clooney to fix it. And that includes a wide variety of skills. And one of his friends, another lawyer at the firm, is going insane, basically, slowly losing his mind. And through the course of events, basically Clooney's driving, and he sees some pretty horses on a hill, and his life is pretty fucked up, and he's thinking about stuff, and just enough where you'd stop that car, and I'm going to go look at those horses. And he just walks up the hill to where the horses are, and they don't appear to be scared of him, and his fucking car blows up.
Yep.
Because basically there's a pharmaceutical firm the law firm represents, and they have deemed him, he needs to go. He knows too much. So basically, they're having this big meeting with the shareholders at some boring convention center, and Tilda Swinton comes out, and Clooney basically accosts her, and he's like telling her, "I know everything. I know this and that and this." And basically, she eventually breaks and says, "How much? How much do you want? How much will it take?" And right before he reveals that he's been recording the whole conversation, he starts to get really agitated. But the part I really love the most is where he goes, "I am not the guy you kill. I am the guy you buy off. I am the guy you send in to kill somebody." But basically, the way he delivers that, "I am not the guy you kill," and then her face when she sees the cops coming and realizes she's just been recorded and screwed. It's just, makes me want to get off my couch and cheer.
That's one of the all-time. I don't like really audience reaction in movies where people are clapping and shit because clapping is for live audience, for live show for me. But when Clooney shows up in that room, that's one of the few moments where you're like, okay, I can get on board with everybody clapping here and everything. It was in a sold out auditorium, and when he just shows up, kind of in the corner of that room and just in the shadows or whatever, and surprises her, everybody's like, "Woo!"
It's almost like he's offended.
Yeah,
that's
this. Why it's such a great line reading, because he's like, "You're such an idiot.
Yeah.
You're so stupid. You don't kill me. I work for, just pay me off."
Yeah, he's pissed off at their stupidity more than he is them trying to actually kill him.
Yeah,
he's like, what the fuck, man?
Exactly.
One of my least favorite, this made me think about my least favorite hero monologues, and it's fucking The Dark Knight. Brilliant movie, but I cannot stand that line delivery that Christian Bale gives when Joker's hanging upside down. And he's like, "This city just showed you that people are ready to believe in good." And he's still doing the fucking bat voice. And it's just like, God damn it, man. Like, just, no. It doesn't work.
The internet says the bat voice is part of the suit, and he's not putting it on.
Oh, come on. I understand that in the Batfleck version because he's got the Funnel Fury Butterbar thing.
But he has it in the other movies, too.
That shows him somewhere early in Batman Begins. It shows him putting something in the suit, and everybody says that's what makes it.
Even though it's not as well defined.
There's no.
He's got this weird. The people are ready for good. He's got like this weird. Anyway, fuck it.
Yeah,
it's funny because you forget how bad that line is because the rest of the movie's so good, but it's just as bad as the end of Dark Knight Rises, where it's like, "No, Bane, I came back to stop you."
Yeah.
But my favorite one is in the middle of the movie. So it's kind of a weird hero monologue, but it's William Wallace in Braveheart, where he's like, "Hey, where are you going?" "I'm going to pick a fight." Mm-hmm. And he's so menacing in that midfield meeting where they're just like, "All right, here are the terms. You surrender right here. You get your nobles get blah, blah, blah," that kind of thing. And William Wallace is just like prancing around in his horse and everything. And he's just like, "Yeah, I've got a demand for you." And, he does all this stuff. And then further, I want to get this quote right. "Before we let you leave, your commander must cross that field, present himself before this army, put his head between his legs, and kiss his own arse."
Yeah.
And he's laughing. His eyes are all lit up and everything. He's just like, "This is the greatest thing in the world." Oh, man. The way that he taunts those guys is just fucking great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That movie still needs to chop about 22 minutes, but
I agree.
You know what? I haven't watched it under that light recently. Like it came on recently. I watched it and I was like, I was 18 again when that movie came on. But I haven't gotten to that point where I'm like, oh, it really could use a trim. I haven't gotten to that.
I always quote that one line he says to his girlfriend, to my wife. "I love you. Always have, always will." And then she dies.
Yeah.
Not my wife.
Right.
Nice.
His girlfriend in the movie.
Well, they've got the wonderful it's in basketball, isn't it?
Yep.
Where Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
I love you. Always have, always will.
I want to marry you.
I want to marry you. Yeah, they do a lot of little like 90s quotes and that, and they do the Titanic and all that.
I love those conversations they have in the dugout because then they've got the whole like, dude,
yeah,
dude.
Well, I guess you do have a point.
All right, let's do one last one. This question sent me into a tailspin of mental acrobatics.
Mm-hmm.
A question for the next podcast. In the spirit of the best 5 consecutive movies question that we had a few weeks ago, What is your favorite set of 5 consecutive songs on an album? Now, for the kids out there used to be these things called albums that had a track list. I guess the only person that does that these days is Taylor Swift. She has it's on her face and everything.
Yes, if you know Taylor Swift, then you know an album.
Yes, an album, and they have a certain order. They're not all in a Spotify.
You know what, though? Honestly, though, Barrett, that might be a little glib of you to do that.
It is extremely glib.
Because I do believe that the album is starting to make a bit of a comeback. Actually, records themselves have started to make a comeback, which means, therefore, albums are starting to make a comeback.
Sweet. I love it.
There you go.
For example, this person would have to be Time, The Great Gig in the Sky, Money, Us and Them, and Any Color You Like from The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, that's a great list.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are the best 5 consecutive tracks on an album?
Despite what Barrett's going to tell you, this is a lot fucking harder than you think it is.
It very much is.
Because you'll get on a roll. It's just like when we had to do the best run of movies in our alphabetized Blu-ray list. You'll get on a roll 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh my God. That fucking song.
Yep.
Shit. Doesn't count. It's very difficult.
Okay, so an album that I wore out in the 90s is Radiohead, The Bends. It starts off with Planet Telex, which is a great song. The Bends, the title song, is great. High and Dry is an awesome, it was a single that was released. Fake Plastic Trees, which is my favorite off that entire album.
Yep.
And Bones, which is not as well known, but it's a great song too. And so nearly that whole album, I was about to say 12 in a row are good on that album. There is a lull towards the end of that album. But that said, the first 5 are all winners.
See, I totally agree with you. I think, though, you could make a case for just My Iron Lung and then the rest of that album too.
Oh yeah, Just is amazing.
Yeah.
I was trying to refresh my memory on it, and I was like, I may have not listened to those songs as much as I listened to those first.
Yeah, because then you have Black Star, and then you have there's some
the whole album's great.
The whole album's so good, man. That's a good call.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know you wanted me to go with my Reinhold Messner pick that I put in the email, but I'm not gonna.
I like that pick.
Reinhold Messner's an awesome album. You should definitely check it out. But I'm going to go with Freddie Johnson. The album's This Perfect World. If you know a song by Freddie Johnson, you probably know Bad Reputation. I know I got a bad reputation.
Featured at the end of Kicking and Screaming, the Noah Baumbach version.
Well, all right then.
Yeah.
A fantastic song that somehow doesn't even fall within my 5. I love this album. In 98, in the 9 months when I lived in Chattanooga, between college and moving here to Nashville, I listened to this album every day.
What is the album called again?
This Perfect World.
Oh, yeah.
Which is actually the name of a song. So the songs, the 5 in a row, are Two Lovers Stop, Across the Avenue, which is maybe my favorite song on the whole album, Gone Like the Water, which is freaking awesome, then kind of jangly, Dolores, which is another upbeat kind of pop harmony thing, and then Evie's Garden, which is almost kind of like a little bit of a happy lullaby. Now, I thought for sure this was going to be a guy that I hopped on his bandwagon forever. That's how much I loved this album. And I bought his next album, and there was like one song on it I liked. And I haven't really paid any attention to what he's done since.
He's got kind of a... I don't know why I make this comparison, but he's got kind of a same aesthetic as Fountains of Wayne.
Yeah, well, it was the same era of me discovering both of them. It was also in the Sundays.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this great offshoot band from Fountains of Wayne where two of the guys from Fountains of Wayne and this girl had a band called Ivy, where the girl did the singing, and it's like Fountains of Wayne after a couple of Quaaludes. I don't know if that explains it very well, but we listened to the shit out of that album too. Anyway,
it is extremely hard to do this because when I started this exercise, I was thinking about what are the best albums of all time. Michael Jackson's Thriller is an easy candidate, and it's got great songs, but there's always something that screws it up.
Yep.
Like you've got Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, and then you get Human Nature and Pretty Young Thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
And so then I went to Michael Jackson's Bad, and Bad's got this great run to close out the album. It's got Man in the Mirror, but then it's got I Just Can't Stop Loving You.
Oh.
Followed by Dirty Diana, Smooth Criminal, and Leave Me Alone.
Yeah.
So if that fucking song wasn't in there, it would be perfect. But that fucking song's awful. It's awful.
Wow.
But the rest of that is awesome. So there is one other. Okay, I've got several for this. I won't go through all of them because music is so personal, and a lot of people haven't heard. I listed Tom Waits, which is a great an album called Small Change from 1976. Probably a lot of people haven't heard that, but a lot of people have heard Prince's Purple Rain.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I thought would be a shoe-in just all the way through. But after Let's Go Crazy, you've got Take Me With You, which is a terrible song.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got The Beautiful Ones, awesome song. Then you've got Computer Blue, which is a fucking terrible song. After that, though, it's got a great run of 5 songs. Darling Nikki, When Doves Cry, I Would Die For You, Baby I'm a Star, and Purple Rain. So that is definitely by far the winner, but I've got a couple of other ones. I've always thought that The Killers had the most perfect side A of all time, and then the worst side B of all time in Hot Fuss, their debut in 2004. All of the hits, every single one of their singles was the first 5 songs.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, Mr. Brightside, Smile Like You Mean It, Somebody Told Me, and All These Things I've Done.
Yeah.
And then the
That's
album just fucking, it's a terrible side B, but it's a great side A. And then just 2 other ones. Weezer Pinkerton is a great album and very influential album to me. Also doesn't have, because it's got some weird themes in there. But the last half of that album is great. The Good Life, El Scorcho, Pink Triangle, Falling for You, and Butterfly are all terrific tracks. And then one that maybe people haven't heard, I think I introduced Chris to this. It was Fiona Apple's most recent album. It's called The Idler Wheel, and then a bunch of other words after that. Whipping chords and things like that. But The Idler Wheel ... is essentially how it's known. And please go out and listen to this album. Start to finish, it's fantastic. It's from 2012. But it's got this, to close out the album, Left Alone, Werewolf, Periphery, Regret, Anything We Want, and then this song called Hot Knife, where it has about 10 different vocal tracks of Fiona Apple singing over herself. And it's unbelievable. And in fact, Fiona Apple's sister is also on that doing a vocal track.
Interesting.
If the very least, if you just Google Hot Knife and listen to it, I think you'll really enjoy it. I do believe that video was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson.
They used to date.
Yes. And he's done 1 or 2 of her videos. One of them may have been Across the Universe from the Pleasantville album. Soundtrack, not album. Anyway, great question. Love it. Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah. All right. Let's see, everybody. Keep going to SinCast presented by Cinemasins Facebook. Going to SoundCloud. Going to Cinemasins Twitter. Going to Reddit. Going to write us an email.
We're everywhere, baby.
We've got just comments galore.
That's right.
And all 3 of us are manning different areas of that comment world there. But keep going there and giving us some comments. And that'll do it for this week. It's Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, and Barrett Shear. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Comment on our episodes on our SoundCloud page. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. And be sure to visit cinemasins.com.
I saw a funny comment. I think it was on the subreddit that said, "Do a SinCast on the Mount Rushmore of Ninja Turtles."
That would be awesome.
Done and done. I just love the way her smile turns when she's like, "Do it, Mr. M.
Oh, yeah.
Do it. Fill me up." I was watching a little bit of Red Dragon earlier, and they even got the guy when they made Hannibal, who's like selling off the Lecter merchandise, and like Clarice comes and confronts him, but she really just wants to know who he sold it to, and it's Gary Oldman. But that actor, the black guy, I can't think of his name. He's even in Red Dragon as the orderly at the mental health facility.
Really?
Yeah, he's like the guy that brings in the phone to Lecter and says, "You have 5 minutes to talk to your lawyer." I was like, oh, because I had just seen Hannibal a couple weeks ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised you go back and look at Silence of the Lambs if he's in that one too.
Interesting.
Mina Suvari? Was she in Silence of the Lambs?
Totally.
American Silence of the Lambs?
Do it, Mr. Lecter. Fill me up.
It's Frankie Faison, he's in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
character actor.
Frankie Faison.
He's in The Wire.
He's in The Silence of the Lambs. He's Nurse Bernie.
There you go. So he's in all
yeah.
three. He's in Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, and Hannibal.
That's crazy. They had that same thread
I agree.
all the way through.
Although
there.
I think I don't think he's in Hannibal, but the Chilton guy that runs the asylum is in Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon.
Oh yeah, is that the Anthony Held?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was talking to my buddy Jason, who flies the news helicopter, and he did 2 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq where he flew Blackhawks.
Jeez.
Like the whole time. He was like describing like how they feel and like the difference between that and Chinooks. And I guess that was probably a Chinook, the one with the 2 rotors on it.
Mm.
And like it's crazy. He's like, yeah, man, you get in there and it's got a different feel to it, and Blackhawks are the greatest helicopters in the world and all that stuff. Like, man, I would
Except
just
when
like
they go down in Somalia.
Yeah,
Indeed.
that's rough. That's some bad
That's
shit
a bad
right there.
time for every actor in Hollywood, but especially Josh Hartnett.
Mm-hmm.
I like that movie a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just hard to watch.
It
Well,
is.
I know some soldiers who like couldn't watch that movie because it's
Oh,
such
really?
a devastating story.
Is that Ridley Scott?
Yeah.
He had 2 movies that year: Black Hawk Down and Hannibal.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking
We
about
were just
Hannibal.
talking about Hannibal.
I thought for sure you were going to say Body of Lies or Body of Evidence, whatever the one is with Leo.
Body of Lies.
that no one in the world has ever seen.
Have you seen it?
No one I know in the world has ever seen
What?
that movie.
I've seen it.
Shit, you got to ruin my shit right
Yeah.
off the bat.
It's
I
probably in the
remember-
collection.
I remember one of the ushers because I was in New York when that movie came out. And he's like, "Hey, you gonna be watching Bodies of Lies tonight? Bodies of Lies, man! I want to watch Bodies of Lies." He's the same guy who was like during the that Rambo last Rambo movie was just like, oh, and like in Blood Diamond, he sees Jaimin Hansu and he's like, hey, I know who that is. That's that Give Us Us Free guy. What? Give Us Us Free
From
The
Amistad.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I remember him. We were watching Miami Vice. He gets up in the middle of it and he goes, "Corny shit!" Walks out.
Oh, I might be walking out of Justice League
Justice League.
in a week or
Going
so.
to pound you into submission.
I'm actually very excited that it's only 2 hours.
Well, yeah. Me too.
I was also very excited that the Emoji Movie is only like 78 minutes without credits.
I escaped that one. Thank goodness.
It's so dumb.
Of course, I did have to watch Daddy's Home. Well, that's probably all I need to say right there.
I mean, they're popular entertainment movies.
Entertainment movies.
Yes.
By the way, Emoji Movie, I thought that it didn't make any money.
Oh, it made money.
It made money.
It made some fucking money.
All overseas.
Mhm.
It only made like 60
It made,
grand.
no, it
60
made
million
money
here.
here too.
60 grand.
60 grand.
It
Oh
made-
yeah, it made 86 million
yeah,
here.
yeah. It was I believe the #1 movie when it came out. If it wasn't #1, it was certainly
Yeah, it was number 2. Yeah.
way up there where it like shouldn't have been.
Did you see the holiday talking points?
No, I ignored that. I'm sorry.
I was racking my brain to figure out what steak à poivre was last night.
Where were you that you were trying to figure that out?
I was making steaks.
Is that POIVRE?
Is that potatoes? No, palms are pomme de terre
Yeah,
is potatoes,
palm
right?
is potato, but POIVRE is that
Correct.
the word?
Yes, like favre.
Can I hear it in a sentence? What's the country of origin?
I was eating some steak au poivre last night.
How could you be eating it if you didn't know what it was?
No, I didn't make the au poivre. I just made the steak part.
Okay, but you never found out?
No, I didn't really look it up. I was just, as I was preparing it, I was like, I wonder what steak au poivre means.
Never even heard it. You know, you're just making up shit to not know and give yourself
Pepper.
more work.
Oh, well, then I had steak au poivre. Fuck.
You had a pepper steak.
Stick up a baba.
It
Yeah.
sounds so much better in French, doesn't it?
It's really good. The steak was good.
Mm-hmm.
I still think the steak is better at a place like Morton's or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But this place is like a whole wet bar, oysters, seafood,
Ooh, nice.
and The two things I really liked is the bread they bring out to your table. It's like buttered, salted on top dinner rolls that are hot. That was the best thing I ate all evening. But then with my steak, I also ordered to have all these butters that you can get with it on the side, and I got a blue cheese butter to spread on my steak bites. It's good.
That sounds like it's awesome.
I'll recommend that.
I
Also,
like the
the
butter selection.
ambiance is awesome there. It's very cool.
Nice. I'm on board for like whiskey and oysters and steak.
Seems like that kind of place.
I'm all right.
I know
with that.
you're an oyster guy. So.
Have you been to the Southern?
The Southern? No.
That's like the place for steak and oysters and shit like that.
It's actually in the name, isn't it? The Southern Steak and Oyster Bar.
Oh yeah, I think it is.
I think it is.
I've been there once. It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't like oysters, but give me a good piece of red meat, I'm gonna have a good time.
I don't know how, but they found me, Marty.
The Libyans.
Who do you think? The Libyans. I like how Einstein knows that there's a fucking car driving 2 miles away.
Woof woof.
What is it, honey? I remember when I was doing comments back in the day, Back to the Future, somebody was like, dogs can totally hear a lot of shit far away. And I was like, he can hear that car 2 miles away and know that it's something he needs to bark about.